Ja, välkomna till seminariet om hållbar fred och EUs roll för stabilitet i Maghreb-regionen. Vi har ett samtal på 45 minuter framför oss där vi kommer att höra synpunkter och perspektiv från västsahariska flyktinglägren, Tunisien, EU-parlamentet och Sveriges riksdag. Jag heter Sinan Ferhan och jag är programchef på Artikel 2 och det är jag som kommer leda er igenom det här samtalet. Jag vill även passa på att nämna att vi håller på att byta namn från Emmaus Stockholm, som kanske många av er är bekanta med, till just Artikel 2. Och vi kommer också lämna lite tid för frågor mot slutet innan vi avrundar samtalet. Det är också bra att veta att det här seminariet kommer hållas på engelska, så jag kommer alltså byta till engelska här. This seminar is called Does EU Contribute to Peace and Stability in the Maghreb Region? Once more, there is war between Morocco and the Western Saharan Liberation Movement Polisario. The Moroccan occupation of Western Sahara is not restricted or limited to the countries in question as it affects the entire region. The trend is towards increased polarization. The scope for civil society actors has decreased and the situation for human rights in general has deteriorated. There is therefore concern that the tensions and contradictions will escalate and destabilize the entire region, increasing the need for peace-building activities. In order to increase engagement, influence public opinion, and create political support for peace-promoting initiatives in the Maghreb region, Article 2 implements the project Youth Drive Sustainable Peace in the Maghreb with the support of Folkebanadote The project is carried out in collaboration with 5 partner organizations in Algeria, Tunisia, Morocco, and Western Sahara. Together, the organizations form a peace-promoting network which is the basis of this project. By strengthening the organization's capacity to effectively communicate strategically targeted information, the project aims to widen the space for dialogue and with decision makers at regional and international level, and promote the inclusion and engagement of marginalized groups. Young people are often one of the groups mostly affected by armed conflict and political instability, and yet they are most often left out of the peace processes. The project, therefore, has a special focus on giving young people and women the necessary tools to create dialogue and opportunities to get involved with the peace-building work. Today with us, we have Sania Bashir Abdelrahman, who is Polisario's representative in Sweden and Norway. We also have Hamza Nasri Jredi, who is a human rights activist working with Intersection Association for Rights and Freedoms based in Tunisia. We also welcome Carina Olsson, who's a social democratic EU member of parliament, and Gustav Göthberg, a serving member of parliament from the Moderate Party. Welcome. Let me start off with a question to you, Sania. You were born and raised in the Western Saharan refugee camps in the deserts of Algeria. You have vast experience in the matter. You have worked within the African Union, and since a year back, you became the representative of Polisario in Sweden and Norway. Based on your experience and perspective, how do you view the ongoing war, the destabilization, and the consequences of it?
Yes, exactly. I was born and grew up my whole life in refugee camps in southwest Algeria, and it's one of the oldest and largest refugee camps in Africa. And we've been there for almost 50 years, and that's because my parents fled war when Morocco occupied Western Sahara in 1975. So it's quite difficult for me to be talking about war again now, almost 50 years on, because since 2020 there has been a resumption of armed struggle and armed conflict between the occupying forces of Morocco and the National Liberation of Western Sahara, the Polisario Front. And we are here talking about this right now because something that's very fundamental and basic has not been respected as per international law and international legality, which is the right to self-determination of the people of Western Sahara. And many of you maybe have heard that Western Sahara is actually considered the last colony in Africa. It's hard to comprehend that in the 21st century we still have cases of colonialism, in particular in Africa, and that happened to be my country. And to answer your question, it is a big concern, especially for us as Polisario. This resumption of armed conflict has been something that the Polisario warned the international community for many decades. If the rights of the Sahrawi people are not respected, if the international law is not implemented in Western Sahara, and we see it happening now. And unfortunately, again, it's not taken very seriously, because it's not seen as a threat to the regional stability. And I can tell you, unfortunately, that there is a big potential that this conflict will escalate in a region that's already very fragile, and with the security situation in the Sahel, the political situation amongst the countries in the Maghreb region. And we will not really see sustainable and effective peace in the whole region unless Western Sahara occupation is ended and international law is respected. So for me, it's very important to remember that this is not so far away from the European Union. It's literally at the doorsteps of Europe. It's only 14 kilometers away. We're not talking about Syria or Yemen or Afghanistan that are across the planet. We're talking almost 14 kilometers away. And if we continue to ignore just how serious this escalated armed conflict and its impact on the region, we will see very devastating consequences. And we're very hopeful that if, again, the European Union acts in a proactive way to make sure that Western Sahara is decolonized and the right to self-determination of the people of Western Sahara is finally implemented, then we can talk about really achieving sustainable peace, and the region can prosper and thrive as it deserves to do.
Thank you. And for you, Hamza, Tunisia was seen or regarded for a long time as the country with the most potential in relation to democracy, civil liberty, and rights in general. And now we can see that there's a decrease, a rapid decrease when it comes to rights. And the situation now is probably worse than before the Jasmine Revolution in 2011. How would you describe, since you yourself had your own personal experience of having to flee the country for your own security, how would you describe the situation in Tunisia and how it might affect the entire region?
Yes. So first of all, excuse my bad English. I'm not a very good English speaker, but I'll try to do it. It pains me deeply to see my country, Tunisia, the first Arab country that revolted against dictatorship and that had this domino effect on the other countries, retrograding, and we are now on a situation maybe we can say worse than pre-revolution situation. Unfortunately, nowadays in Tunisia we have political prisoners. Since 4 months they are in prison just because they are opposite of the regime of the new president Qais Said. We have women in jail just because they said that they are against what's happening in Tunisia now, but because they yelled for democracy. The effect of this on the region, I think, as like in the revolution, we have this domino effect that affected all the region. Democracy was overspread the region. Now it's same the opposite situation. Now we're seeing democracy shrinking, we say. Maybe, yes, and the public sphere and the public civic sphere is decreasing. So yes.
Thank you. And over to you, Karina. You represent the Social Democrats in the EU Parliament. The EU deepens its bilateral relations with the countries of the Maghreb. But how can the EU raise the peace and conflict situation in the region on the political agenda?
In the European Parliament, we have the possibility the whole time to lift up questions about human rights and then the international politics when we are in the plenum. And so I have often lifted up the situation in Tunisia, and my colleagues had talked about West Sahara. So we must the whole time have this on our agenda. As you said, Senia, it's nearby. it's our neighbors, because it's only a sea between, and the sea is not so you can almost see of this to northern Africa. So it's our neighbors, and we have need to find better ways to support also the human rights in North Africa, and we must do it together and cooperate. How can we do it? And regarding the negative development in Tunisia, we see, as you said, that it looks like it was the beacon of democratic development in the region, and now it's democracy decreasing. And during my time in the European Parliament, I have worked on issues related to gender equality and political freedom in Tunisia. And therefore, I'm so sad that some of the women are in prison because they said what they are seeing and want to do something about to more democracy and to more gender equality. And the Tunisian president case said is increasingly using repressive methods to silence political opponents. And we must lift up this and also say it to him. So this bilateral discussions is also very important. And West Sahara, it's a sad, long story about this situation, as you said, Senia. And I have been the president for Social Democratic Women Association, and we have a long cooperation between our organization and women from West Sahara. And we must not forget to have this cooperation and have discussion to the both in the European Parliament but also in UN about the situation, both of course for women and men and young persons. And in the Swedish labor movement we have a long tradition, both the cooperation between women, as I said, but also the young organizations, and of course with Polisario. So we must let this continue, but it's not only say it will be continue, because it must be a difference. But if you compare how the situation is right now. So it's ongoing discussion, and also that we must lift up the concrete persons, organizations, and so on.
So that leads us to my follow-up question. How does the EU ensure that countries in the regional cooperation actually respect international law, democratic space, and human rights in general?
We must show in Europe that we respect human rights, because now we say that we are depending on about the question of migration, and then we must show that we respect human rights. And now I think that it will be gone in the wrong direction. So we must show that we do our lessons and then cooperate, and also said to these leaders who not follow human rights and democracy, you must follow this if we are going to have cooperation about energy, migration question, and so on. So we must do by ourselves our lesson, so we can discuss it with. So and then it will be. I hope good relations to have these discussions. But now we can see that there are right-wing parties in Europe who don't want to have this discussion about migration and so on, and migrants from Africa and Northern Africa. And we have also this decreasing in democracy and human rights in the North Africa. So it's not on the right way, but we must not give up. We must the whole time have this discussion ongoing, and the cooperation between organizations who want to in another way that we can see now.
Thank you. And to you, Gustav, you're a member of the Committee of Defense, and after hearing the answers from Hamza and Essenia, how do you consider that the moderate party or how do you consider the risk and opportunities being part of EU who deepens its bilateral relations with the countries of the Maghreb?
I didn't catch the question.
How do you and the Moderate Party consider the risk and opportunity as being part of the EU who deepens its bilateral relations with the countries of the Maghreb?
Well, I must start by agreeing with what Karina said. This is a long and sad history, what we have seen in Western Sahara, for example. And preparing this intervention, I thought of what the old Roman historian Tacitus said about Rome, about the downfall of Rome, that they made a desert and called it peace. And that is a similar analogy to what we see now in the deserts of the northern Africa, that it's not peace, and there's no organization or no really personal stakeholder who is the driving force to progress in this. I think that the European Union can do a lot. I think when it comes to maintaining the economic dialogue, for example, is very important. And I think, as Karina said, to show ourselves that we are democrats and could be good role models, but also, and this is a fundamental part, being a politician, you have all these, especially in foreign policy, you have all these different conflicts and different regions in the world, and I think it's crucial for the European Union to have this high on the agenda. And that is it's almost impossible to have it always on the agenda, but we need to push that. My proposal, and what I think, for example, is that the European Union has a special representative for the Sahel region. I think we should widen that so that we have a constant EU representative also on the Maghreb region, which is wider. In that case, we can make sure that these things are always high on the agenda, and also when it comes to European foreign policy. That is one very concrete thing that I think could really be fostering the possibilities of economic and democratic development in the region.
Follow-up question for you as well. Is there anything as part of the government that you see that Sweden could do to ensure that international law is respected in the region?
Well, of course, as a member of the of the United Nations, and that is very important to remember, this must be a UN-brokered peace process. And we have a ton of resolutions from the United Nations Security Council which are not being carried out in terms of Western Sahara. And of course, as a member state of the United Nations, not the European Union, we can do a lot, and I think that is where the center of the progress should origin from. But of course, when it comes to also the European Union foreign policy, it is vital that Sweden really put an emphasis on the importance of having a comprehensive foreign policy. So that can we do, but also to remember the United Nations perspective of everything.
Thank you. I will ask you guys now some short questions, and I expect some short answers from you both. I start with you, Yesenia. How do you see the role of AU in contributing to a peaceful and stable development in the region?
I agree with Gustav that the European Union can really play a proactive and central role in the Maghreb, but also more specifically in Western Sahara. And unfortunately, it hasn't really played that historically because it has been very explicit and implicit in supporting Morocco in its occupation. And like you said, in complete contradiction of United Nations General Assembly and UN Security Council resolutions. And I agree with you that Europe really should lead by example and should be a role model. And Sweden in particular has consistently had this position that EU could be a beacon of supporting international law and making sure that any peace building process or any political process, in particular with Western Sahara, would be one that respects international law and the fundamental right for people to choose, which is their right to self-determination. And it's really unfortunate that so far Morocco has been very effective at bullying, I would say, and blackmailing European countries through these agreements that are even against the European Union Court of Justice decisions that illegally include Western Sahara. So essentially, taxpayer money, your money, is sustaining and maintaining a very bloody occupation and a violation of international law and human rights. And I think that is very sad to see. And I think the course can be changed when the European Union says, we will not have any agreements with you unless you do this and this. And resolving the occupation of Western Sahara should be the top priority, because there is no unity of Maghreb, there is no peace in the Maghreb without the finishing of the decolonization process in Western Sahara. And I believe the EU could be a vital player in that role, in addition to, of course, the UN and other actors like the African Union.
And from your perspective, Hamza?
Yes, so I think the EU must prioritize and should prioritize human rights in his approach, and through concrete action by holding his partner in Maghreb region accountable for human rights, through advocating for the freedom and the liberty of political prisoners, and through not shying away from addressing human rights abuses when even it risks political relation with partners in North Africa. Also through supporting independent civil society organization to achieve their goals and aims in the region. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And Sania, in the short term, which measures are most important for the EU to implement?
I think in the short term would be making sure that the European Union respects its own decisions and the rulings of the European Union Court of Justice, which clearly says that Western Sahara should not be included in any economic agreement. So at least the EU should not be directly involved in this occupation, in this process of unfinished decolonization.
Could you please just explain that a bit more, the decision that has been made?
Yes. So since 2016, the European Union Court of Justice has issued 4 times saying that the fishery agreement and the comprehensive trade agreements between Morocco and the European Union should not include Western Sahara, even though it has included Western Sahara, and that Western Sahara and Morocco are 2 separate and distinct territories. And as per also international law, as per the legal opinion of the United Nations, the African Union, it says that Western Sahara should not be included in any trade agreements. No company should invest or trade in occupied Western Sahara without the consent of the people. Again, the consent is having and making sure that the people decide on their fate and their future through the process of self-determination. Until that happens, every company should really refrain from investing or importing or exporting goods and products from occupied Western Sahara, because it's not in their ethical responsibility and it's not in line with their ethical and international obligation. So that's the most immediate, that the European Union really should respect its own legal institutions' decisions, which are very, very clear, and that hasn't happened. But already on the 17th of July, actually, for the first time, European fishing vessels will be leaving Western Sahara, because the final appeal stage is being finalized as we speak. So the fishery agreement could not be renewed until the final appeal is decided, and we expect it to confirm previous rulings that Western Sahara is a separate and distinct territory from Morocco, and no one should be involved in sustaining and maintaining this illegal occupation and now a war, essentially.
And concerning Tunisia, Hamza, what do you think? What are for the short and long term? Which measures are most important to implement?
I think we have a priority now in Tunisia, liberating the political prisoners and the people exiled like I am. We should go back to our country safely, and we have to go back to democracy. That's why we think that EU should put a pressure on the regime now and on the new political order in order to go back to democracy. Yes.
Back to you, Sania. How do you see the opportunities for the local civil society to work together to reach and influence the EU to act for peace building in the region?
probably one of the most difficult and challenging tasks has been for us in Western Sahara is reaching to our neighbors and our brothers and sisters in other countries. And that's primarily because we have to be very critical of that, is that there is very limited space for them to exist, whether in Morocco itself, in Algeria or Tunisia, where the political space and freedom of expression and assembly is very limited. So it's very difficult to expect them to support us, especially in Western Sahara. But I also strongly believe that it's the younger activists and human rights defenders and civil society who could come together and change this dynamics and this trend once and for all. We've always been very, especially open to getting more engagement with civil society and political elite, for example, in Morocco, and we hope that that will be possible, because so far what has been evident is that the political process between the Polisario Front and Morocco has not been very successful. But I think initiating some sort of parallel process where you have civil society organization, young people who are often excluded from the negotiations, come together and try to change and hopefully to the positive, change those trends. But again, it can only happen if the environment and the place to exist as a civil society is conducive for everyone.
And from Tunisia's perspective,
Yes.
Hamza, how do you see the opportunities for civil society actors to work together to reach that influence to create stability in the
Yes, the experience of civil society in Tunisia is very unique in the region. Through all the hard times, we always invent new tools and new ways to struggle against dictatorship. Now, what we're trying to do is we're trying to lead a national dialogue for civil society NGOs and organizations in Tunisia in order to prepare at least an alternative for what's happening now. And I think it's going on the right way. And yes.
And for you, Karina, how do you think the EU can help assist the civil society actors in the region?
As politicians, we have the possibilities to lift up questions, as I said before, at the agenda. In EU, it's often called resolutions. And thanks to cooperation between me and Intersection through Article 2, we have made it possible to lift the question as an urgency. But we need more, of course, in this cooperation, and also more than resolutions. We know action. We now must have action, and it's time to go from words to action. And EU needs to have a key role at the work. So we must have the possibilities to support civil society, diplomacy, I mean, and also that we have discussions with both part, Morocco and Polisario, to discuss this, to have these bilateral meetings. But at the same time, we must have and say with greater pressure on regimes that don't follow what we have had agreed on. And of course, at the same time, I will follow up what you said, Sinea, because if we have had decisions in the European Parliament and did not follow it, we must do our lesson, and that's what I said in the beginning. We must do our lesson by ourselves, but because otherwise we cannot have the pressure of others. So this is very important too. So I will follow up that, and then I will have a meeting with you again, so we can see what we can do together, because we can do much more together. And I have also, I'm rapporteur on the budget for AFET, our international policies in the European Union, and now, of course, it is very hard situation, both in budgeting because we have this situation in war in Europe and so on. But at the same time, we also can have discussion about that because we know that Russia has a strong interest and tries to exploit the region instability. So we also know that this is the situation. So we must have this cooperation between Europe and our neighbor where you are in the North Africa. So we must follow up and all the time have this on our agenda if we will support and go on for human rights and democracy and the rule of law.
And according to you, Gustav, what is needed to assist the public civil society in the region?
Well, I don't think it's a question of rocket science. The European Union has today several programs where the Union could exchange views with civil societies and NGO, youth, minorities, women. And I think that with the existing framework that we can have these exchanges, it can also be widened to the further or the wider Maghreb region. We do it in Belarus, we do it in Turkey, we do it in Armenia and Azerbaijan. Why not expand these? And the framework is there, and it's not that difficult, I would say, as not being a member of the European Parliament, to accomplish with this. So using the existing frameworks of what we already are doing when it comes to bringing NGOs and civil society to the table could be of paramount importance also here.
If the framework is already there, why do you think this hasn't been done before?
Well, we always know that NGOs are often the organizations invited last to every events. So I think that is just a repetition of what we can see also when it comes to tackling climate change and change and everything else. So I think it's a matter also, as I said earlier, to maintain on the agenda and to have these issues on the agenda. And if we could have a European Union special representative for the wider Maghreb region, we could make sure that also the NGOs and civil societies are always being listened to and discussed with.
Yes.
And we can see that even in Europe, support for NGOs are decreasing, and also democracy now it's decreasing. So it is a discussion the whole time how we can support civil society, and that we must have it on the top of our agenda. And I work a lot with gender equality, and we know if you are going to get the silence and no protest, you know that you must say that to women you must not be in that and have no support. So it's often that prisoners and also that they refused women to protest and so on. It's about strategy. So at the same time we must know that we must support youth organizations and women associations because they are often in the front line for democracy and the rule of law and human rights. Excuse me, ma'am, but this is fact.
Yeah.
Thank you. Let's leave some time for questions from...
If I can add something?
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Sure.
Since you bring to discussion women's rights, I have to mention that the former president of the Tunisian Association for Democratic Women, the eldest feminist organization in Tunisia, and a former member of parliament, Bouchra Belhaja Hamida, now is exiled because of the new political order in Tunisia. So I thought it's good to mention her because she's one of very well-known feminist activists in Tunisia, and she have a lot of achievements in Tunisia in terms of women's rights. Now, unfortunately, she's exiled because of the new regime in Tunisia. Yes.
And I told Hamza that I have been in Tunisia twice, one for gender equality and the democracy, and have a discussion with parliamentarians, former parliamentarians. They are not there now.
Yes.
And also about the migrant question, because we know that we must cooperate for the situation in the whole Africa. So we must have this cooperation between EU, Europe and Africa, and their Northern Africa are special important.
So yeah, again, let's leave some time for questions from the audience if we have any. Otherwise, we can continue with the questions here. Okay. Yeah, we have to. We're just waiting for the mic, sorry. Yeah.
My name is Carl Wachtmeister. I've been working with a university in Timbuktu in Mali, West Africa, which was founded by a Muslim woman in the 14th century. And I thought that would be of potential before this terrorism started. And even through this situation right now, which is quite delicate, and with the Wagner troop moving in, I still think and hope and pray that there is something that can be done within that context, still in the civil sense, somehow with the government. I don't know. Do you know have any ideas about doing that, even now?
If you could specify the question, sorry.
Okay. I have myself worked on several ideas to rehabilitate this old university, connecting with the Uppsala University, for example, to make it internationally known and connected in this global context. Also issues like conflict resolution, conflict management, environmental issues, human rights issues, all these things in this within the university. So if you have any ideas to which I cannot think of, to work with the government or somehow still with this difficult situation, which you know, I presume, with the terrorism there, could it still be done? So do you think, I don't know, I want more than a yes or no question, if you have any ideas about how it could be done.
Are you asking anyone specifically?
Oh, sorry, the person, I don't know if you, who of you could have any idea about that. I don't know if you know about the situation there.
Not specifically, but I think this is a very good example of why it's very important to engage local actors and people who are primarily affected by armed conflicts in contexts of Mali or even in my own country, Western Sahara, although they're not comparable in that sense. But it's unfortunately, like Karina said, it's oftentimes women and young people are the last in being engaged and actually getting their opinion on issues that affect them the most. And this is a very good example of this very important higher education institution established by women in a predominantly Muslim country like Mali, that goes to show that the stereotypical image that is often portrayed of people in our region, and that applies to my country, because one of the things that surprises people most about the people of women of Western Sahara is that you have this extremely liberal and a society that's primarily led by women, including women who are actively engaged in demonstrating non-violently. And in the occupied territories, the human rights defenders and the activists are primarily women, literally using their own body to protect their freedom and the freedom of their people. And one of the, just to go sort of along the line of the example, to mention some names, one of the most prominent human rights defenders who was under house arrest for 582 days, and she was literally raped and sexually abused together with her mother and sister, all of that period, and in complete isolation. But she resisted and continued to insist that her voice and her story had to be heard. And again, I think the real solution really lies in empowering people who are very knowledgeable of their own context, empowering people who are victims in the first place. And I think women tend to be the ones who are victims first, but the ones who really, really want solutions. So I think involving them in any process is critical, and we should never forget and leave women behind until as an afterthought or as a form of tokenism, because you'll have a delegation of negotiators and then of 6 men, and then they will be, oh, that's not a good optic for a photo, then let's just grab a woman. I don't think most women would really want to be used as tokens for a photo. we have to ensure that the chair is brought to the table for them to sit at. And I think that's the best way to do it, is to make sure that they are brought to the table. Otherwise, as women, I think we'll create our own table at some point, and maybe that's what needs to be done. But I wouldn't lose hope, because women are very resilient everywhere. And I think we see that everywhere, whether here in Sweden, or in Ukraine, or in Tunisia, or Western Sahara, or in Timbuktu.
Thank you. Only have a few minutes left, and we had another question over there. If you can bring the mic, please. Yes.
Apologies if my question, you have dealt with it, because I came a little bit late. But, you know, West Sahara has one of the greatest resources of mineral phosphorus. So I wonder, with this crisis where the mineral fertilizers from Russia now is blocked off, and how has it created more tension for your struggle? And is there, because of those interests in the phosphorus resources, is there a change from EU? Maybe I missed that. So in that case, you should ask someone else.
Excellent question, and extremely relevant. You're absolutely right. Western Sahara sits on the biggest phosphate reserve in the world. And Morocco has primarily used the phosphate from Western Sahara, even though Morocco itself has phosphate. And of course, you could see that because of the high demand and the increase in prices of phosphate, Morocco has really further intensified its repression in the occupied territories, because people were actually following trucks and following the phosphate and making sure to sort of report on where it's going. But those activists and people who try to document this plunder of and stealing of the resources of Western Sahara, and like I said, it's completely against international law, are now being completely isolated under house arrest and silenced, so that it's not exposed. So with the resumption of armed conflict in Western Sahara, exactly like you said, with the increased demand for fertilizer, and also increased demand for more food production, and you need phosphate for food production since it's used in fertilizer. This is just an added dimension that will make this occupation and this process of resolving the conflict that more complex. Of course, resources are a critical part of why Morocco continues to occupy Western Sahara, but this added dimension will just make it that much more complicated. There are some companies, including Nordic companies, for example, Liara, which is a Norwegian phosphate company, that pulled out from Western Sahara. Now, one of the biggest exporters of phosphate of Western Sahara is actually New Zealand and the US, which is very interesting. We also see new players from Mexico and potentially even Israel, which is very interesting development as well. So even though very few European companies continue to be engaged, Morocco is trying to find other allies who may not necessarily care about their ethical responsibility. So that interest will continue just to make the situation worse and more complex and potentially escalate the conflict for sure.
Thank you. We're unfortunately out of time, so I want you guys to join me in thanking Esenia, Hamza, Karina, and Gustav for some applause. Thank you. And thank you all for joining and listening to us, and thank you for the people at home as well. Thank you.